Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi, Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This week, we'll be talking, CCL and UCL and Open Cup and Rolling Stone and MLS Roundup and My Brilliant Friend and NWSL and Madonna, Jesse Pulisic, Christopher Walken, American Ownership, Cubano sandwiches, Seinfeld, and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you on this Monday, May 9th in the year 2022?
I am doing well. You know, we usually tape this podcast at 9 a.m., which is the time we're doing it today.
Yep.
Luis Aguilar sent us a text message last week to tell us that the May 16th taping would have to be in the afternoon because the studio wasn't available in the morning. And somehow it registered with me that he was talking about today's taping. And so I scheduled a fitness class.
Your Orange Fitness, your Orange Crush, Orange Dream, Orange, what's it called?
Orange Fitness Theory.
Orange Fitness Theory. Orange Theory, there we go.
And then I realized that I had made that mistake. And so I had to cancel at the last minute my fitness class, and which is a big no-no. They were not happy with me. So this is the first little sort of bump in this relationship.
Okay. You can't make, you can make it up, obviously,
of course,
at a different time, but they like to know because, there's limited seating, standing,
exactly,
cycling, whatever kind of stuff. All right. Well, I hope you would not be, one of those people that had to walk around for the rest of your life in shame, having been kicked out of the Orange Theory.
Well, as I told you, I've been wearing my Alexi Lalas State of the Union shirt for these classes, so I've already been walking around in shame anyway.
Boy. Yeah. All right. Watching anything interesting?
I had a fun Saturday night. I went to a comedy show in downtown LA at the Orpheum Theater. I saw Patton Oswalt perform.
Oh, really?
It was pretty good. And then this upcoming week is the McCartney concert at SoFi I'm excited about. On the television front, the usual suspects, Atlanta. We've got an episode of Better Call Saul coming tonight. And then last night was the season finale of Winning Time. Spoiler alert, the Lakers won the 1980 NBA title. And it was interesting to watch that because I had also this weekend watched the remaining 3 episodes of the Magic Johnson documentary. I told you I went to the premiere where they showed the first episode. Right. It's a 4-part documentary. So I watched the other 3.
Well, it's done now, so I can watch it.
Correct.
Perfect. Okay,
so I watched the documentary about it, and then I watched a semi-factual TV.
Creative license, dramatic license, all that. But there's going to be another season, right? I mean, it's gone very well, right? Despite the lawsuits and such.
For all the controversy surrounding Jerry West's portrayal, I find Larry Bird's to be even more problematic. I mean, they make this guy out to be the worst human being on the face of the earth. Did he ever have any thought that wasn't just F you to Magic? Like, that character needs to be fleshed out a little bit more.
If anybody needs to be filing any type of suit, you think it should be Larry Bird?
Absolutely.
Oh, my goodness. A couple of things before I get to what I watched. And this comes up, as I've said, time and time again, and it just gets more and more. You are resonating, my friend, as I've told you. And people out there from far and wide not only listen to the podcast for what you say, but in particular what you recommend. I was talking to my wife earlier, and she wanted to shout out your what's this thing called? My pretty friend, my beautiful friend. What's it called again?
This would be My Brilliant Friend.
My Brilliant Friend, which I know you have talked about over the last couple of years, I would think. She agrees with you that it is just riveting and beautiful and incredibly done, and so she wanted to give you the thumbs up. This is my family, a lot of my family wanting to give you kudos for being ahead of the curve and recognizing beauty and artistry when it is out there. I have yet to see it, so I can't comment on it, but she wanted me to tell you that. And then I was talking to my mother the other day, and my mother has especially over the last couple of years, as a lot of people have, has really gotten into watching a lot more because we've kind of been inside and all that. And so she is one of those rare people that never watched Seinfeld in any consistent capacity or at all. She had never seen Seinfeld. And so she in a sense discovered this pot of gold that is Seinfeld. And I mentioned that Seinfeld is right up there, if not your number one, when it comes to shows out there. And so, she also listens to the podcast and wanted to express the the connection that she now has because she knows that Seinfeld is such a huge part of your television viewing history. I also have now set her up with HBO Max, or now whatever we are on right now, because she said, well, what's the next one? And I obviously mentioned Curb and mentioned the connections to that. So she will be moving on to that. And like her, for example, her only connection with Julia Louis-Dreyfus was Veep, right? And we all know where we all were introduced to Julia Louis-Dreyfus, which was Seinfeld. So well done there. You can continue to be on the forefront of everything and on everybody's mind when it comes to your recommendations and what you have watched. I, however, I go a little bit off the road here. Two things that I watched this week that I think bear mentioning. One, a documentary called Like a Rolling Stone, which is the life and times of Ben Fong Torres, who, for those that don't know, was one of the original and still, incredibly powerful and influential editors of Rolling Stone. And it goes into his life. He was Chinese American, grew up in San Francisco, and it goes into how he came about being this incredible voice and director, if you will, of one of the most influential magazines and music magazines and pop culture and entertainment magazines of all time in Rolling Stone. But then it also goes back into his background and all the the incredible things that happened. And he has become a star. And they talk about, here's someone that was very much behind the scenes, but has been so influential. He has become a star in his own right, and really just a fascinating bio of a fascinating human being. And then digging back into rewatching stuff and what holds up and what doesn't. At Close Range, which stars Sean Penn and Christopher Walken. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I might have talked about it before, but I watched it again. The story, I think, is incredibly dark and dangerous and violent in a wonderful way. I actually went back and watched the what were the old movie critics called? Ebert, Rogers and Ebert, or whatever. Siskel and Ebert. There we go. I went back and watched their original review on it. They were positive, but they really didn't think that there was any kind of redeeming value to the actual story. But they did, again, like anybody, single out the performances of then a pretty young Sean Penn and a Christopher Walken, who, they're just incredible in this. The other part of this movie that for me resonates is that I can give or take Madonna, incredible performer, writer, and entertainer, all-time, one of the all-times. But as far as the material, there was stuff that I liked, stuff that I didn't. For the most part, she wasn't necessarily on my list. However, if I had to pick the best song that Madonna ever did, it would be Live to Tell, which ends up being not only the theme for this movie and used in this movie at the time Madonna and Sean Penn were together, all that, but it's even used throughout the movie. So not just the single and not just the song that you hear at the end of the movie. The motif is used throughout. And I think it's one of the most beautiful songs ever written. And for Madonna, who wasn't necessarily always looked at for her singing, I think that she nailed it in this song. And it just takes this movie for me to a whole nother level. So that definitely holds up. So those are my two suggestions for this week. If you've seen it, great. It's worth seeing it again. If you haven't seen it, you should really see it for, like I said, those performances and just in totality what it is as a movie. Anything else, my friend, before we get into the soccer part of this podcast?
Well, on the old movie front, this will be a perfect segue to talking soccer.
Okay.
After we covered the Seattle Pumas second leg, a bunch of us went to grab some beers at a bar nearby. And every TV in the bar was showing a Taxi Driver.
But it was weird. We got into this bar, and there's a bunch of TVs around. It's not necessarily a sports bar, but there were a lot of TVs in this bar. And at the point we come in, they're showing, the basketball or whatever was going on. And then there was this weird moment where you turned one way and back the other way, and there's a tarp that came down in the front of the restaurant, and it completely turned into this different weird type of bar. And to your point, every single screen started showing Taxi Driver. And you think on the surface of that, well, that's kind of weird, but it's just going to kind of be in the background happening, a classic type of movie. And yet it was mesmerizing. And also keep in mind that the audio wasn't being pumped in. It was just the text and the closed captioning going on. And I turned around at this table, and whatever kind of conversation we were having went completely by the wayside. And it was happening all around the bar. And I guess it's an incredible testament to the power of this movie that you don't even have to hear the audio. You can just watch the closed captioning, and it is a riveting type of moment. And there were people at our table that had never even seen the movie and were riveted.
And Rob Stone being one of them. And I told him this is probably not the best way to be introduced to this movie, but nevertheless, he was into it.
I mean, Scorsese did that, right? I mean, he would be appalled at that is how Rob Stone first saw and appreciated his work of art, if you will. But yeah, that was weird. But to your point, we were celebrating, as we do at the end of tournaments. We get together with everybody that's worked in front of the camera, behind the camera, and just kind of toast to the end. And in this case, we were toasting a little piece of history with the Seattle Sounders being CONCACAF Champions League champions and winning that title. Is that where you want to start?
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right. So we are recording this on Monday. I said that I was going to give until Monday a grace period for Seattle and the Seattle Sounders nation out there in terms of making fun of them or chirping back when it comes to Seattle. So we're recording this on Monday. But before I get into that, congratulations. Congratulations are in order to the Seattle Sounders, who, as we mentioned last week, were vying to become the first MLS team to win CONCACAF Champions League in its current and modern form. And they did it. They did it, as far as I'm concerned, easily, and I think they showed all of the different reasons why myself, you, and so many others looked at them from the moment that this matchup with Pumas was fixed as the overwhelming favorites. And they did it in front of close to 70,000 people up there in Seattle. We had talked a few weeks ago about how there was this push from the Seattle Sounders organization to, in essence, educate their fan base as to why this was important, why this was monumental, why this was going to be historic. And they certainly got the word out there. Like I said, 70,000 people there to witness this piece of history and to witness Seattle Sounders, who, as I have said before, are, as far as I'm concerned, the best organization, the best club in the history, the almost 30-year history of Major League Soccer, for their consistency of success, for the success that they have had when it comes to winning MLS Cups, winning Open Cups, now winning CONCACAF Champions League, and so they get this one to add to their trophy cabinet. What'd you think of the game, my friend?
Well, I thought it was a bit closer than the score. Seattle, they had those two injuries in the
early
first
on.
half, Nuhu and João Paulo having to come off, and that took some of the air out of the balloon in the stadium, and it looked like we were going to get to halftime 0-0 with a fairly even game at that point, and I thought it was so big for Seattle to get that goal, Rui Diaz off a deflection late in the first half, but even you said at halftime that Seattle wasn't playing that well, and they were somewhat fortunate to be up at that point. And then you get into the second half, and they weren't killing off the game, and the longer it stayed 1-0, Pumas was applying some pressure that, you allowed yourself to think, man, this is going to come down to the wire. And then, to their credit, they scored two beautiful goals late to ice it. So it wasn't, you see the score 3-0. It wasn't like they blew them away from the beginning and left nothing to chance. Mid-second half, that game was still in the balance. But yeah, they showed themselves over both legs to be clearly the better team in my eyes. And this had been coming. I mean, there's a difference between being better than somebody and being on a different level than them. And there was a time when you watched MLS teams play against Liga MX clubs in this competition, you felt like the Liga MX clubs were on a totally different level. That hasn't been the case for several years now. As much as some in the Mexican media still tried to project this image of total superiority, if they were honest with themselves, they would have admitted that the past few years, MLS has more or less caught up and they just haven't gotten the breaks. The last two finals involving MLS clubs prior to this one was decided on penalties. The other was a one-off game in which the MLS team led in the 70-something minute and then let it slip away. So one of these years, you were going to get the right matchup and the breaks were going to go their way, and an MLS team was finally going to win it, and it happened. And I'll be very interested to see where we go from here. I don't think it's going to flip completely right away, and MLS is going to start dominating this competition. But I'd also be fairly surprised if Liga MX ripped off a bunch of wins here and rendered this kind of a aberration. I think more than likely it's going to go back and forth now the next few years, which is going to be fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's this feeling of this sentiment when it comes to Major League Soccer that this is going to be kind of like you've seen the Die Hard series, right? So remember in the second Die Hard when John McClane at the end and the moment of truth brings down the bad guy's plane, but in doing so, he provides the light and the landing strip for all the other planes to come in. So lights will guide you home. And there's this feeling that this moment is that John McClane moment when Seattle is going to provide the landing strip for other MLS teams to come in and win it. I don't, to your point, I also don't think that necessarily is going to happen, but I think it's going to be much more evenly balanced. Keep in mind that this is the Seattle team, which we have been talking about as an elite and the best team in the history of Major League Soccer, playing against a mid to lower level Pumas team. And when it comes to the amount of money spent, there are other teams in Liga MX that spend a whole lot more money. Now, be careful, because we may have poked the bear, and we all know that it's still not a fair fight necessarily. It's gotten much better, but it's still not a fair fight in that MLS teams still are playing with one leg behind their back, if you will. And so going forward, now Pumas has done this and will have riled up Liga MX. That's actually a good thing. The more competition and the more fires that are stoked between these two, I think the better it is going forward. But we'll see how these Liga MX teams approach next year's CONCACAF Champions League. I will say this too. When it comes to the way that we positioned this, when I say we at Fox, and the way that MLS positioned it, I think it was correct and fair for us to position it as this historic event because of the huge difference in what CONCACAF Champions League is relative to the past where it was CONCACAF Champions Cup. But I was getting plenty of texts, even beforehand and throughout the broadcasts, from those of us that are, older and have been around, and I recognize that, I am biased because I was part of one of those teams, saying, hasn't this been done before? And yes, it has in terms of an MLS team being champions of CONCACAF, being the best team in CONCACAF. And we've mentioned it time and time again that the Los Angeles Galaxy and DC United have done this in the past. And so I want to certainly give those teams, those players, those coaches, those front offices, and most importantly, those fans, their due. Because while it is vastly different, and therefore I do think is right and fair to make it historic in what Seattle has done, when we, the 1930 World Cup, right? 13 teams. Uruguay had to win, I think, if I'm correct, 4 games ultimately to win the World Cup. But we still call them world champions. We still say that they won the World Cup, even though it's vastly different to what the World Cup is and is going to be, for example, in November and December. But I think for what this meant, I think, as I said, it was right and fair for us to position it and color it in that way. But don't think for a second that Seattle has done something different and unique relative to being the best team in CONCACAF, because that has certainly been done in the past.
And this is relevant in this discussion about whether Seattle has surpassed the Galaxy as the most successful franchise in MLS history. Do you feel that what they've crammed into in half the time, 13 years, while the Galaxy have been at this for 26 years, the resume stacks up now where you can make a case that Seattle is the most successful MLS franchise?
I can make the case, and I have made the case, in a league that we know is very difficult from year to year to maintain an elite status. That a league that is structurally has been created to have parity and manufactured parity, it's very, very difficult, which is why you can see teams from year to year fluctuate, go from worst to first and first to worst. And it has happened in the past. And yet when you look at and you compare and contrast. So the trophy cabinet, I think that they are equal. But when it comes to that longevity and in totality of a team, what Seattle has done, there hasn't been that up and down, that ebb and flow that a team like Los Angeles, which albeit has been in the league much longer, has gone through, and is still going through it right now. I mean, the lofty heights of the Los Angeles Galaxy, when you look at them in the early 10s, if you will, or back in the early aughts, when they were at their best, has not really been replicated. And yet, from a Seattle Sounders perspective, year after year, changing coaches, changing players, they have not missed a beat when it comes to Garth Lagerwey on and off the field, what he has done. Now Craig Weibel, what they have done in terms of picking off talent from other teams, either other teams on the field, other teams off the field, the amount of fans that they have, the relevancy that they have in Seattle and therefore in the league, and now the global recognition that they have. Yeah, I have no problem saying that they are, in totality, when you look at the 30 years of the league, the best Major League Soccer teams and what they have done on and off the field.
It's interesting too, this eternal debate about parity versus super clubs and the pros and cons of each approach. When you look at these European leagues that are top heavy and have these big bad teams dominating, the thing they'll say is there's value in having a Real Madrid and Barcelona represent you in international competitions, or in Germany's case, a Bayern Munich. And as you watched MLS teams struggle in the CONCACAF Champions League year after year, you allowed yourself to think, well, I guess that's the trade-off for parity. It means that your best teams are never going to be that good. And I'm not suggesting that Seattle are in the same universe as Real Madrid or Bayern Munich, but I'm just saying that having MLS teams start to win CCL on a fairly regular basis and then giving a good account of themselves at the Club World Cup at least gives you this feeling that you can have your cake and eat it too, that you can have parity and a compelling league where everybody can be competitive, and at the same time, you could still have these elite teams that can represent you well on a global stage.
Yeah, but I hope that this doesn't give MLS a false sense of security. And look, MLS, if they were here, would be giving us the list of this is what we have done, and this is how far we've come, and this is the money that we have added, and these are the mechanisms that we have added in order to enable these teams to better compete on the global stage and obviously within our region. But it is still structured in a way that doesn't allow teams to do everything that they want. And there will be those that say that's the reason why they're going into potentially 30 years of existence, because of the prudent and some would say frugal ways they have gone about structuring this league. But what I hope that this does is light a fire in terms of, again, just continuing to take off some of those restrictions so that those that want to do big things, that want to do big, bold things, and it's not just relative to winning CONCACAF Champions League, it's relative to the broadcast rights, it's relative to that next 30 years, it's relative to the perception, both domestically and globally, of what this league is going to be leading up to what we know is going to be a huge and important summer in 2026. I hope, like I said, that what Seattle has done increases or accelerates the desire internally from Major League Soccer, and therefore all of the owners, to say, let's allow teams that want to do it the ability to do so. But in doing so, to your point, Mosse, it doesn't throw it out, but it definitely goes against the grain of what has ultimately built this league, which is that parity and which is standing firm on the structure that creates that parity.
On the topic of the Club World Cup, we've alluded to it a couple of times in this conversation. So the latest there, we know Gianni Infantino is jonesing to do this expanded 24-team version, but he's having all sorts of issues finding a place in the calendar and getting everybody to sign off. So in the meantime, they've kept doing it the current way. And although it's not 100% confirmed, all indications are that this next one is still going to be under this current format. It will likely be in February of 2023, somewhere in the Middle East. It will include 7 teams, the domestic league winner of the host nation, and then the 6 regional champions, which in Europe means Liverpool or Real Madrid. In South America, the group stage of the Libertadores is not over yet, but I'm 99% sure it will be a Brazilian or Argentinian club, either Flamengo, Palmeiras, Atlético Mineiro, River Plate. Estudiantes are looking pretty good, somebody of that ilk. And then, the Asian Champions League winner, the African Champions League winner, the Oceania Champions League winner. And one word of caution there, there's this notion that by virtue of winning CCL, this guarantees that Seattle are going to face one of the big boys in the Club World Cup. In fact, there was a New York Times piece that quoted an MLS executive as saying, "This is so cool. Now Seattle are going to get to play Liverpool or Real Madrid." But if it's done again under its current format, then the CONCACAF team has to play a quarterfinal. And over the years, that's been a 50-50 proposition for Mexican clubs. They've lost that game a lot. So including in this most recent edition, Monterrey lost to Al-Ali. So, you could fly all the way down there and not even get to face a European or South American opponent if you lose that game. And then even if you advance, you got to see which side of the bracket the draw puts you in. You might have to face a South American team first and beat them before you get a crack at a Liverpool or Real Madrid. So let's wait and see how everything shakes out before assuming that you're going to get to watch, Christian Roldan go up against, Mo Salah and Sadio Mane and company.
All right. So, as I mentioned, it is Monday, and we have been fairly and rightfully extolling the virtues of Seattle Sounders and what they have done on and off the field. And we have been anointing them, and we have been praising them and doing all that kind of stuff. But now it's Monday, and Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? And so they are insufferable up there. They invented being insufferable, and they are the Insufferables, as far as I'm concerned. You had the Invincibles. Seattle is the Insufferables from now on. So I have coined them that, and they will probably take that and use it as a compliment. You got something to say?
Well, I have one last thought on CCL before we transition to MLS, which, by the way, will begin with Seattle. So
okay, but just let me say this in terms of being insufferable, and there can be the feeling now that everything that you do is beyond reproach, and that your doesn't stink when it comes to Seattle. Nothing could be further from the truth. As much as I have praised, and as a lot of people have praised over the last week. I mean, for example, my good friend Jeremiah O'Shawn, who you should follow, and he does a wonderful podcast up there and has followed this team closely for years and years and years. He was opining yesterday on Twitter, as one does, saying, I was thinking, is there another MLS team that would ever put their youth team in a field level suite for a final, as opposed to selling it and stuff like that? So it's getting to be a little bit much. All right, Seattle is wonderful. They are certainly not perfect. And by the way, Seattle, speaking of Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? Congratulations on winning CONCACAF Champions League. You're in 12th place, and you lost again over the weekend. And so get your together, because one of the reasons why everybody has praised you for so long is your consistency of being elite and certainly making the playoffs. And if the irony of all ironies, if in the year that you finally win CONCACAF Champions League, you don't make the playoffs, I think that would take a little bit of the luster off. So get yourself together.
No, so, okay, one last CCL thought, and then we'll transition to what you just brought up. Although I just said it's no guarantee that they're going to get to play Liverpool or Real Madrid, it is pretty neat that on May 28th, Liverpool and Real Madrid are going to square off in the UEFA Champions League final. And MLS folk, for all their lives, they've watched games like that as something that's taking place a world apart, a different ecosystem, something that they're not connected to at all. And now they're going to be watching that through the lens of finding out of a potential opponent for Seattle in an upcoming competition. That is kind of neat, right? That Seattle awesome. Now it's sort of...
It is awesome. Despite being insufferable, it is awesome.
But as you mentioned, we'll begin...
Wait, one more thing. This goes back to the way the team is run and the leadership off the field. Garth Lagerwey, because of the structure, he gets voted on. He's at the end of his contract at the end of the year, and the fans get to vote on whether they want to keep him. I would say he's probably pretty much assured of keeping his job. But as I said before, as we move forward, and there is a succession type of plan when it comes to Major League Soccer, I would absolutely be comfortable with having someone like Garth Lagerwey lead MLS and be the commissioner of MLS going forward, because I think he's that smart, and I think he has a perspective on this league and a unique perspective on this league that would be incredibly valuable going forward into the future. And look, Don Garber has done an incredible job, and he's going to continue now, but there will be a point where that transition happens, and there will be a lot of people and names thrown in there. And I would throw Garth Lagerwey in a second in there and have no problem him leading the Major League Soccer into MLS 4.0 or whatever we're on right now.
So shifting gears to the weekend, Pumas, by the way, followed up that loss to Seattle by losing 4-1 to Chivas in the repechaje in Liga MX. So
you love saying that.
Their Liga MX campaign is over as well. It was a rough week for them. Seattle followed up their CCL triumph by losing 2-0 away to Dallas, a heavily rotated lineup, Jesus Ferreira and Paul Arriola with the goals. And I'll say this for Seattle. This is the last MLS game where you have this sort of CCL crutch. Right. Everybody understands you having that hangover. Starting next game, now you got to get going MLS-wise, to your point. And, you know, we keep talking as if it's a given that as soon as Seattle focus on MLS, they're going to shoot up the table. I think they probably will. But João Paulo is a big loss for them. ACL injury, out for the season. So it's going to be a lot of Obed Vargas, who's very talented, but we'll see if he can
still very young and inexperienced.
Campaign. But so, yeah, another goal for Jesus Ferreira. The sentiment keeps growing that right now he's ahead in that center forward pack for the U.S. national team. Your thoughts on this game?
On the Jesus Ferreira game? I mean, look, we knew there's almost a part of Seattle that they were better off not even getting on the plane. But, yeah, I mean, so I don't think that, well, I know that nobody's losing sleep on it. They won the game that they needed to win in that week. But now we're in a new week. And to your point, this is a really interesting and almost a no, not almost. It is a surprising MLS so far. And we're still kind of early days. But the way that this is all shaped out with the standings and where everybody is, I mean, you got big-time teams and what we thought were big-time teams in the form of, you know, a New England or an Atlanta struggling, and you have what we thought were the lessers and some of, you know, the bottom dwellers, if you will, like Cincinnati, which we'll talk about, doing different things. And so this might be a year where it's not as simple as just turning on the faucet for Seattle and automatically you go on a run and win a bunch of games and you're right back into contention here. So congratulations to Dallas, which, by the way, we've taken shots over the years in terms of the product that they are putting out, not in terms of their ability to develop talent and sell it and that part of the business, which has not only been successful, but it is looked to as a shining light. But the product on the field, the one that the supporters pay for, and your fans and customers pay for on a continual basis, has lacked. This is a solid team. This is a team that actually spent money in retaining an American talent in the form of Jesus Ferreira. This is a Dallas team that had a really good crowd this weekend, and you know that matters. People coming out to actually watch this team, and you're looking at potentially, for better or worse, and there's arguments on both sides, as the starting number 9 for Greg Berhalter's Men's World Cup team come November and December in Qatar. Again, as I told you, this false 9-ish type of situation with Ferreira, I look at it as a secondary tactic, but there's still just nobody up there right now that is that primary number 9 striker that has made himself apparent to be that number 1 tactic of Greg Berhalter. So it might just be, this is not great, but it's the best we have.
Atlanta beat Chicago 4-1. Cisneros with a hat trick, but the big news coming out of this game, Miles Robinson tore his Achilles tendon. He's out for the season, and this puts his World Cup in major jeopardy. Terrible news, huh? Yeah,
I mean, they announced that he had surgery this morning. Again, we're recording on Monday morning, so he's already in on surgery. I mean, we've seen this in the past with, even recently with Aaron Long, another center back, by the way, who might even feature now that Miles Robinson is out. Even back to, I can think of Brian Ching. So it's this weird injury, and yet when you see it, you kind of know it because it usually happens without any contact, and it's just one of those weird things. I know people will blame the turf, and certainly that may have or may not have had something to do with it, but how does that explain when people do it on grass? it doesn't really matter. Ultimately, this is devastating news for a young player, but a young player that's had an incredible year and was faced with that opportunity of playing in a World Cup that could fundamentally change his life forever. And look, he's gonna get back from this, and he will continue to play and maybe look to 2026 to have that moment. But it just shows you how fleeting it can be and how quick it can go from being on the top of the world. And so for a Greg Berhalter right now, who gets up here and this morning and looks at the situation, what do? I mentioned Aaron Long, Chris Richards, a lot of players that aren't in that tandem that we kind of have put in Penn with Miles Robinson and Walker Zimmerman in the back. There's still the John Brooks situation, which continues on. I do feel that train has kind of left the station, but maybe this changes it. And when I say left the station, not that he isn't a good player, but I don't think that he's good enough where you bring in such a different type of player into this young dynamic. I really think that Greg Berhalter has created and gone about creating a situation where he wants it to be young. He wants it to an extent be immature and naive and use that to their advantage. And yes, there is the looking past into 2026. But this is bad for Miles Robinson, obviously. This is bad for Atlanta. This is bad for Major League Soccer in the value and the asset that they are developing. And this is obviously also bad for the U.S. men's national team going forward. But if this is truly the deepest talent pool that we have had, then next man up. What else, Mosse?
Montreal, who
oh my goodness,
got off to a rough start when they were juggling CCL, but since then have been on fire. They beat Orlando 4-1. Jordan Mihailovic with another goal. Speaking of the U.S. national team, he's a player getting a lot of
He'll get called in. And he has been called in before, so don't act like this is everybody, they've kept him out in the cold or anything like that. He's had his opportunities and just hasn't really shown when he's been in. So here's another opportunity for him, and maybe with the incredible magic that is happening up in Montreal, he can carry it with him over the border when he comes down and plays with the U.S. national team if he gets called in.
LAFC Philadelphia, this was billed as a potential MLS Cup preview. Certainly two of the best teams in the league, and a great game, 2-2. LAFC showing their resourcefulness, equalizing off a set piece. They've scored a ton of goals off set pieces. I think both these teams showed themselves to be very strong. They're going to be right there in their respective conferences.
Yes. So, again, Wilfred Nancy deserves credit for what he is doing up there in Montreal, as does almost weekly when we talk about Philadelphia Union and what Jim Curtin has done. Both teams doing it in a very different way and certainly with less resources than others. But the power of the group that they have that they have created, even losing players but bringing players in, and with all those changes. I definitely, when I look at people ask me, who's the best team in MLS right now? I still think that despite the result that LAFC certainly is up there, but I am absolutely comfortable right now in saying that Philadelphia, in the way that they play and in how comfortable they are in what they are and what they aren't, and so that they are sitting at 19 points at the top of the Eastern Conference. Is a surprise to no one. LAFC still sitting at the top of the Supporters' Shield, and I still think if I had to say who the best team in Major League Soccer is right now, I still think it's LAFC.
Austin near the top of the Western Conference standings, but they've had a favorable schedule up to this point. So RFS1 game this weekend was Austin hosting the Galaxy. We kind of built it as a test to find out if Austin were for real. They struggled. I thought were very sloppy. They lost 1-0. It could have been worse. The Galaxy had some terrible misses in that game. So do you feel like Austin to some degree got exposed in this game?
I think they actually had to play a team. And, again, this is a much and vastly improved Austin FC team. And I think it has the potential to be a playoff team. But they had yet to face a top 5 opponent in either conference through through their season. And when they actually faced what would be an elite team, even though it's not a top 5 team at the Seattle Sounders, they ended up tying against a B team-ish type of Sounders team. So yeah, I think the jury is still out as to does their record and their place in the standings right now really tell us how good they are. And yesterday, the Los Angeles Galaxy, who is, yes, a top 5 team, but I don't think it's a great team by any stretch of the imagination, they made them look all out of sorts. I mean, the whole game was a sloppy type of mess from performance, and neither team really had control. It's the kind of game that when you ask coaches after the game, they want no part of, because neither of them at any point felt like they had any control of what was going on in the field. And as I said, very, very sloppy. And Austin ultimately looked like a 2020 version of Austin as opposed to the 2022 version that we have seen so far in this league.
And for the Galaxy, continuing to get nothing out of Costa, Cabral, although Cabral should have had an assist on that horrible Chicharito miss. Ground Sear. Chicharito has now gone 4 straight games without a goal. So everything is a struggle for them. It's all got to be 1-0, 0-0 every week, it seems like. So I think in the long run, they're going to have to find a second dependable scorer there. They can't be relying on these goals from random places. I mean, Mark Delgado connected on a long-distance strike. He might not score a goal like that again in the rest of the season. We did a game against Charlotte, their first home game there, where Efrain Alvarez connected on this incredible strike. How many goals is he going to score like that? So some of the non-Chicharito goals they've gotten so far, they're not really things that are going to be you can count on. So, I mean, they got to, in the worst way, find somebody else that can put the ball in the back of the net.
This is not a sexy LA Galaxy team. This is not a romantic LA Galaxy team. This is not even an entertaining LA Galaxy team relative to Galaxy teams in the past. However, I think it is improved. I certainly think that it can grind out results, which isn't necessarily something that you want to see from the Galaxy. But if you're Greg Vanney, this is part of his process and the evolution. And that they found a way to grind it out yesterday, even though they had so many components not functioning and continuing to not function. I do think the problem is you're counting on these players coming good at some point. And I'm not sure that we've seen anything that really is going to change when it comes to Cabral, when it comes to Efrain Alvarez, when it comes to, I mean, Douglas Costa. I mean, he is a shell of his former self. And the problem with him is, if you're looking for some sort of sign that he is going to kick on and be better, I feel like you're getting signs that it's getting even worse. That's as bad as I've seen him look yesterday. I mean, just from a physical perspective, it looked like he couldn't keep up.
I agree 100%. I think the first couple of games, he showed some flashes where you could talk yourself into him, and I haven't seen any of that in more recent appearances. So, yeah, that one is going the wrong way for sure. One team going the right way is Cincinnati. They won 1-0 away to Minnesota. They have a real up-and-coming star in Brandon Vasquez, who got the goal. And so that's 3 straight wins. Has that franchise finally turned the corner?
Yeah, yes, in that, I mean, but how hard was it to turn the corner? I mean, it was a pretty low bar, and that they are getting wins. I think, you have 2 people that know the league very, very well, in terms of your coach and your general manager. And so I think that is such a different type of approach than they have had in the past, that immediately, with Pat Noonan and Chris Albright, immediately it's paying dividends. This is not an elite team, but this is a team that I think believes in what their coach is telling them and recognizes that if you're just difficult to break down, you can be competitive in this league. And they have been. And Minnesota, the Loons are up and down. You think that they've changed and they're going to kick on? No, it's not happening. And again, if Reynoso's not there and pulling the strings and doing what you need to do, in the same way that Driussi didn't show up for Austin yesterday, and you need these players. I mean, we look at players like Lodero, we look at players like Heel, we look at players like Maxi Morales or Vela or others. They are playing on good teams, but they need to show up. And in this league, you have to have your designated players show up. Phil Neville's has told us that time and time again. And unfortunately for him, it doesn't really happen a whole lot down there, but you got to have it.
One note on Driussi. We did an interview with him the day before this game via Zoom, and he had a translator with him. He doesn't feel confident enough in his English. And I always get a kick out of it. I'm not just picking on this one Austin guy because they're all like this. Translators make no effort to convey the tone of a question. So John Strong, early on in the interview, in an attempt of an icebreaker,
Right.
goes to, Driussi played for Zenit, and John Strong says, I spent some time in St. Petersburg covering the World Cup and the Confederations Cup. What's your favorite restaurant in St. Petersburg? And the translator turns to him in this very serious tone, and John Strong would like to know your favorite restaurant, as if it's like some hard-hitting journalistic question. And Driussi had this look of like, what a odd question that is.
But he answered it. Yeah, I actually looked it up when he answered. It's a very nice, like 5-star restaurant there in St. Petersburg. I don't know if John went to it or not, but it looks very good. So congratulations to Seattle. It looks like, it doesn't look like you are better than you were last year. But again, we're getting into the dog days of summer, and even some of the heat that we saw playing a factor here in the last couple of weeks is only going to get more and more as we go on. I definitely think it had a factor there in Austin and Nashville, which we can talk about. It's those dog days of summer are coming, and things can change rapidly.
What else? Luis Aguilar is notoriously anti-Greek.
Yes, we know
DC United did not make its way into this rundown.
He begrudgingly works with me, given my Greek background.
They did beat Houston 2-0. Fountas with both goals. He looks like he's going to be a real impact player for them. Terrific signing.
Great signing. I mean, you sign a player to be dangerous in attack, and this player is dangerous in attack and scores goals. What more do you want? It's pretty simple. So yeah, DC with the 2-0 win over Houston. Let's see what else. What other games you want to?
Toronto lost 1-0 to Vancouver, but I thought they were victimized by one of the worst calls I've seen in a long time. That disallowed goal. I cannot believe that after a VAR review that goal.
Unless there's something that we're all missing, and I'm sure that there is some talk over there at Pro about how to word the carefully worded release that they are going to have to put out. Yeah, and Bob Bradley, he actually, in reading his comments, I thought he was going to go ballistic. And he would have been completely, I guess, in his right to do it. If you haven't seen it, it's one of those where the goalkeeper makes a save, there's a rebound, and in an effort to put the goalkeeper's hand over the ball, which in that moment of contact would mean that the goalkeeper has possession relative to the laws of the game. The attacker comes in and kicks the ball. And in the replay, it's completely evident that it happened before the hand of the goalkeeper got on the ball. And it wasn't dangerous in any way. It was a 50-50 ball that was there for the taking, and the attacker had every right in that moment to go for the ball. And not only to go for it, but ended up winning it. And yet, in this day and age where we have the technology to fix these types of things, it wasn't fixed. So yeah, but I think it also points out that we are living in, while it's a technology age, we are still living in a age that requires human involvement. And until that changes, you are going to have mistakes at different times, but they are, I think, much more limited than in the past. And so that is the progress and the evolution that comes with the technology. But still, there's going to be moments. And all that technology, by the way, is ultimately programmed by humans.
You mentioned Nashville, so we'll go there next.
Okay.
Also not in the rundown.
Typical.
2-0 winners
Hates
over
Greeks
Real Salt
and
Lake.
people from Nashville.
Yeah, their first victory in their new stadium. Romney and Sapong with the goals. I think we both picked Nashville to win MLS Cup.
Yeah, we did.
All right, how are you feeling about that?
I'm feeling good about it. I mean, this is their first actual win because they got that was 1-1 last week in their new stadium. They had 30,000 people last week. I think they had announced 28 or 29,000 this week, which is good because you're going to see. Keep in mind, this is a stadium that was built bigger than any of the soccer-specific stadiums in the past at the 30,000 range because they believed that there was that market. We're going to go there in a couple weeks, so I'll be really interested to see what that stadium looks like in person. It looks great from the outside. We're going to be doing a night game, thankfully, because I think it's a problem in terms of those day games, both in terms of the heat and in terms of the sun across the field, which is difficult. It's probably difficult from a playing perspective, and it's difficult certainly from a viewing perspective, whether you are there in the stadium or on television, because it cuts right through the middle of the field. But listen, if this is the worst thing that's happening when it comes to a stadium, then I'll take it. I'll take it. But congratulations to Nashville again. And yeah, they're looking good for both of us in terms of that pick of potential MLS Cup winners.
We'll hit the two New York teams next. NYCFC finally cooled off. They had been scoring goals for fun, but they're held to a 0-0 draw by SKC. And then the Red Bulls, 1-1 draw at home against Portland. The Red Bulls
they can't win at
so
home.
Bizarre.
It's
they 5 wins on the road, but struggling to get points at home. Niaz Goda and Aaron Long with the goals. Aaron Long, a player that, as you mentioned, with Miles Robinson going down, we're going to be looking at even closer from a U.S. national team perspective there. So he finds the back of the net.
Yeah, but to your point, the inability at home, which is where you think you have not where you think. I mean, the numbers say you do have an advantage, but evidently not when it comes to New York. But the flip side is they can't seem to lose on the road. So I don't know what it is, but they're going to have to, if they ever get it together, they'll be unstoppable because they just won't lose. So, yeah, I mean, and as far as Sporting KC and NYCFC, if you're Sporting KC with the struggles that they have had, you take that as a win going into NYCFC and getting a 0-0 there. And, our friends up in San Jose from where we are here in Los Angeles, they get a win at home against Colorado. That's a good thing.
Well, there's it's this return to normalcy after the chaos of a nice and tidy 1-0. I mean,
can you imagine coming out of it's like when the astronauts come back down, right? And they have to get or sea legs or whatever. It must be so disorienting for these players that have gone through, I guess, for lack of a better word, an ordeal that for many has probably left them scarred, and and to figure out that they don't have to chase everybody everywhere they go and to the bathroom and back or anything like that, and that they just kind of can try to control a game and maintain some possession here and defend here in a normal way, if you will. And look, it gets you a result, 1-0 against Colorado. So congratulations to San Jose for that result.
I think the only games we haven't hit are Charlotte beat Inter Miami 1-0. My boy Miguel Angel Ramirez continuing to do a pretty good job there.
Yep.
And then New England Columbus 2-2. Any thoughts on?
Well, the New England Columbus game, Columbus came back at the death to get that point. So congratulations to Columbus for doing that. New England it's still not there yet. It's still not there yet. And, maybe Bruce would tell you, well, maybe we were much better than we actually were last year and we were going through that moment. But, New England's still not getting full points, and they had it in the palm of their hand there and letting in goals against a Columbus team, which is not really very good. Going back to the Atlanta-Chicago game, Chicago, which came out like gangbusters at the beginning of the year, and we thought we're going to be this incredible team and defense. They're letting in a lot of goals right now. So Ezra Hendrickson, whatever magic he had at the beginning, is starting to wear off for this Chicago team, and we'll see if he can fix that. All right, I think that's enough of a wrap up. I'm sure that there'll be those out there that are angry that we didn't mention enough their coach or their players or their supporters or this and that. Yeah, okay. So want to move on?
NWSL?
Yes. The bizarre scheduling of the NWSL.
Full disclosure, I didn't follow this that closely, but it seemed like every other tweet in my timeline this weekend was about an injury and somebody complaining about the players not being protected enough. Do we have an issue in this league with I saw that the players had to grab a stretcher because it wasn't coming out quickly enough for one of the players that was injured? That was very disturbing.
We attach meaning to everything that happens in general, I guess, in life and certainly in soccer and even more so in the professional soccer, both men's and women's, that is still growing and evolving. And so, there was an injury, and it was serious enough where they had to bring out the actual stretcher, and not necessarily the stretcher that you take a player off who's got a cramp or something like that just to get him or her off the field. But in this case, it was a serious injury, and so they always have a team, an EMT team, there ready to get somebody on a stretcher, and if need be, put them in the ambulance and get them to the hospital as quickly as possible. And in the moment that they felt the need for that type of stretcher, which is a much more robust type of stretcher to go on the field, it came on the field, but the pace in which it was going was too slow for everybody's liking, and players had to go and help them in. Is that indicative of the lack of resources and or caring out there of the NWSL leadership and ownership? I don't necessarily think so, but it's obviously not a good look for a league that can't afford to have bad looks, and the optics of that happening in a league that continually has had to defend themselves against not giving the amount of resources that they have. But is it fair? I don't know. I mean, maybe this emergency crew, this is how they are taught to do it when they get on the field, and that they didn't run. Is it because that's not what they do, or they didn't have enough people, or what? These are the types of questions that are constantly brought up. And if you hadn't messed up so many times in the past, you probably wouldn't be taken to task for what seems like absolutely everything that happens. All right, well, how do you want to approach this?
And the North Carolina Courage did win the Challenge Cup. The Courage have two very talented Brazilian attacking players in Debbie and Caroline, so I was very happy to see them win it. And those two players are going to be key figures for Brazil in the next Women's World Cup. So there you have it. But
keep in mind that the Challenge Cup, which we had seen in the past, and it had gone well, and so they wanted to continue it. And the time that they said we're going to do it in 2022 was at the beginning of the season. But it went so long that the semifinals and finals occurred after the actual beginning of the regular season. So you're crowning a champion and awarding a title and the silverware and the confetti to a team after the regular season has already started, and those teams that were involved had to postpone their opening weekend games in order to accommodate this. To say it's not ideal is an understatement. But congratulations to the North Carolina Courage for winning the NWSL Challenge Cup.
If only you had a chance to interview the commissioner of this league and question her.
Look, she made it very, very clear. Jessica Berman made it very, very clear that she was very, very new on the job. But to your point about attaching things to everything, and everything is a crisis, and everything is a potential for criticism and cancellation or whatever. Did you see the thing where? I only say this because Jonathan Tannenwald, who is a wonderful writer and reporter out there in Philadelphia, and he reports on men's and women's, and obviously being in Philadelphia a lot on Philadelphia Union. You should follow him, you should read him, and do all that. There was a game yesterday in the NWSL, ended up 2-2, OL Reign versus Racing Louisville, and there was a goal line controversy ultimately. And so one of the players, Bethany Balser for OL Reign, came out after the game and said, and I'll read her tweet here. After the game, I calmly went up to the sideline referee and asked him how he thought the ball crossed the line when I was blocking him from it. He said, quote, "I'm very tall," to which I said it was still wrong. His response, quote, "Yes, I might have been wrong, but it's just a goal." And then Bethany, in all capitals, says, "Just a goal," and then there's a frowning emoji. Well, my friend Jonathan Tannenwald retweeted this and said, "This is really, really bad." And then he followed it up with, "The other controversies are also really, really bad. But if, in fact, an assistant referee said that out loud to a player, hopefully there's a prompt investigation." What are you investigating? You're investigating that a referee interacted with a player and said, yes, it might have been wrong, but it's just a goal? What are we investigating here? I don't understand. Not everything is a conspiracy. Not everything is worthy of a frickin' investigation, okay? I love you, Jonathan.
All right. On that note, let's bring this first segment to an end. By the way, we're on track for our first ever 2-hour podcast here. So,
well, there's a lot of happening, Mosse, all right? God. All right. Shall we move on?
Yep.
All right. We're going to take a real quick break, and when we come back, we'll try to keep it short and efficient, but it probably won't. But we're going to take a trip around Europe. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, Mosse. All right, let's try to keep this concise and clear and succinct in terms of what we're doing here. Should we start Champions League or what?
Yeah, let's begin with the UEFA Champions
Okay.
League. The final is set. It'll be Liverpool against Real Madrid. Let's revisit the semifinal second legs. First, Villarreal-Liverpool, which Villarreal came out on fire, dominated the first half.
Don't poke the bear. Don't
2-0
poke the
at the
bear.
break, which leveled the tie on aggregate. Could have been even more. You had that Lo Celso Allison penalty shout, depending on how you felt about that. And going into the break, I thought to myself, well, the first few minutes of the second half are going to be telling. If it feels like a continuation of the first half, Villarreal pick up where they left off, Liverpool are still in a fog, then we could really have something here. But sure enough, Liverpool came out a totally different team, completely bossed the opening minutes of the second half. And I swear to God, I thought to myself right then and there, they're going to win this game. Not only are they going to go through, they're going to win this game. And sure enough, they scored 3 unanswered. They had some help from the Villarreal goalkeeper, really. But Fabinho got one. Luis Diaz, who they had brought on, who made a major impact, equalized, and then Mane got the third. So Liverpool 3-2 on the night, 5-2 on aggregate. They're off to their third Champions League final in the last 5 seasons. No surprise there, right?
First off, you mentioned the goalkeeper is not good. Okay, so I mean that's a problem if you're playing in the semifinal of the freaking Champions League and you don't have a competent goalkeeper. Having said that, this was the perfect example of just how good Liverpool is and just how many gears they have, all right? In that they are able to shift into a completely different gear and dominate. They are able to make substitute. I mean, in the way that we talked about Seattle, and I know that Seattle's not Liverpool, all right? I get it. But in the way that we have talked about the depth of Seattle and not missing a beat and next man up and the quality that they are able to bring in, that's exactly what Liverpool did. And it's no longer, it's always entertaining and wonderful to see, but it's no longer a surprise. This is how good this team is and how good this team can consistently be.
So that was Tuesday. On Wednesday, Real Madrid were trying to overturn a 4-3 deficit to Manchester City. City then score a goal in the second half. Riyad Mahrez, so they're up 5-3 on aggregate. And lo and behold, Rodrigo, 2 goals late in 90th and 91st to level the tie, send it to extra time. Then Benzema from the penalty spot. Real Madrid take it 6-5 on aggregate. They advance. The thing I would say here is there's a type of person that is not comfortable with this notion that, well, there's no footballing logic behind this Real Madrid thing. It's just magic and mystique. They think there's got to be a tactical and technical explanation behind everything that happens, and it's always got to involve one manager getting it right and the other getting it wrong. So I saw some of those pieces after this game, but I don't know. I mean, I suppose the Ancelotti getting it right part, he made some gutsy substitutions. He brought on Rodrigo and Camavinga, who both had an impact. So there's perhaps some meat on that bone.
There is.
But the Pep getting it wrong part, I don't know what else you want this man to do. To me, he set up his team perfectly. Both games, they were the better team. They were up. They had a 2-goal aggregate lead in the 90th minute of the second leg, and on balance of play over both games, it should have been a 4 or 5-goal aggregate lead. Real Madrid did not have a shot on target in that second leg until the 90th minute, and City were dominating the game right up until the point that Real Madrid started scoring goals. So it's just 2 crosses in the box that found their way to the head of Rodrigo in one, his feet in another, and I don't know what else there's to say about it, to be honest.
So it's always the Monday morning quarterback, and it's the looking back on it, right? And there have been times in the past, if you are going to criticize Pep or any coach for that matter, you better have done it beforehand. In that, I can't believe that he set his team out like this before the game even starts. Okay, in this 11, this is ridiculous. He's overthinking it. Why is he doing this? All right, and this is going to be a problem. Or when he makes substitutions, no, he shouldn't be putting this person in because this is going to cause a problem. You can't look back at what Pep did in terms of the substitutions and then lay blame and say, oh, he really, really messed up by doing that, if you didn't see it in that moment. Because I don't, to your point, I don't think that, and this is not to let Pep off the hook, because ultimately, however it gets done, he's there to win, and he's there to win the big one with Manchester City. And he's been given more resources and talent than pretty much anybody in the world, and still is not able to do it. And then it happened in this ridiculous fashion. We thought the first leg they couldn't possibly live up, and yet, I tweeted out one of my favorite things to do in this moment, where, to your point, you can't explain it. It's not a tactical type of thing. I mean, a cross coming in and hitting off of one player's head into another player's head into the goal, that it's not like you work on that. It's not like you plan that if you're Ancelotti or anybody else out there. But to the victor go the spoils, right? And so that there is a spirit, that there is a personality to this team that never gives up and never concedes that all is lost. Yes, that can be attributed to a coach, but trying to find, and I know we are so desperate to like you say, Mosse, to attach some reason as to why things happen in our game. I think our game is the most chaotic out there and is the most difficult to pin down from an X's and O's reasons why things happen. And there is so much more so than other sports an element of just happens, and you can't explain it. You can write all the books that you want, but it's not going to explain or validate anything that you saw happen on the field.
Weirdest subplot of that comeback. When Rodrigo heads it in, why did everybody run to Vinicius to celebrate? And it even kind of fooled the cameraman. Right. The guy that scored was almost like an afterthought in those celebrations. it was somewhat bizarre.
Don't try to ascribe any type of any type of understanding to this team in general, whether it's the X's and O's or the personalities out there. They're operating on a plane right now that I don't think any of us, and probably including themselves, understand.
I mean, the one thing I would say that's tangible is they have the best in the world at both boxes. They have the best center forward in the world right now in Benzema, who's been incredibly clutch and can conjure up goals out of nothing. And they have, in my opinion, the best goalkeeper in the world this season, who's been Thibaut Courtois, who game after game comes up with big saves. I know everybody's talking about that Mendy goal line clearance, but there was another Grealish opportunity that Courtois tipped away, and then he made that save on Foden's header in extra time. So we take it for granted at this point, but every big Real Madrid game, he's coming up with 2 or 3 game-changing saves. And, I do want to bring up the other goalkeeper in this game because, as I mentioned earlier, we went out for beers after the CCL final, and invariably we talked some about the Real Madrid-Manchester City game. And you brought up Ederson to me, and then I checked on Twitter, and Manchester City fans were having kind of a similar conversation. He did nothing wrong. None of the goals were his fault. None of the 6 goals across the 2 games. But we hold him up as one of the best goalkeepers in the world. It would be nice if every now and then he had a blinder and made some incredible save to get City a result. And it's been a while since Ederson did that. So I think that is a fair issue to raise.
That's why you look at Courtois and you say, okay, yeah, he makes the saves that he's supposed to make, but he also makes that one that he's not supposed to make. And that's what you want from an elite goalkeeper is in that moment. So, yeah.
It's Liverpool, Real Madrid, May 28th. We have some time before this final, so I think when it gets closer, we'll really dive into it. I don't want to offer a prediction today. I know Luis Aguilar put that.
No. We'll save it for later. But I will say, and I'm asking you, because we've talked about just this incomprehensible type of play and results. Are they a team of destiny when it comes to Real Madrid? Or at the most crucial moment, are they going to go to that well and find it empty?
That's the storyline here. Because I don't think anybody disputes Liverpool are the better team. If you apply any footballing logic to this final, then you'd think Liverpool for sure. But it's just, can you bet against Real Madrid in the Champions League final with the mystique that they've shown over the course of this?
And if I'm Liverpool, I think I'd rather face Real Madrid because I know how good I am as Liverpool, but I also know that, again, that well will dry up. And if that happens in the final, then it could be easy. So
why did Luis Aguilar, in the rundown, he's got Liverpool, Real Madrid, and then parentheses 1-0. Is that his prediction?
Maybe he's
it's a leftover from a previous rundown.
Boy, you're all over Luis. You are just all over everything that he does.
A little bit of historical context here. These two teams met in the quarterfinals last season. Real Madrid took it 3-1 on aggregate. They also met in the 2018 final in Kiev, which was the last final we covered on Fox, and the first final we discussed on this podcast because we started doing this in February of 2018. Real Madrid won that 3-1. Gareth Bale, 2 goals, including a bicycle kick. Karius with a nightmarish performance, which prompted them to sign out Allison that summer. They also played a European Cup final in Paris way back in 1981. Liverpool won 1-0. Alan Kennedy with the goal. This is 19 combined European Cups, 13 for Real Madrid, 6 for Liverpool. If Liverpool win this, they tie AC Milan for the second most. I mean, this final just oozes European royalty.
It's delicious.
Liverpool, Real Madrid in Paris. I mean, it's going to be pretty special.
You going to go?
No. That offer was on the table. Keith Costigan.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
he's going. But I have work, so.
All right.
Very quickly, the other European competitions, the Europa final will be Frankfurt against Rangers. Frankfurt beat West Ham 1-0 in the second leg to complete a 3-1 aggregate triumph. Rangers beat Leipzig 3-1 to overturn a 1-0 deficit from the first leg. Giovanni van Bronckhorst done a pretty nice job there, taking over for Steven Gerrard. There is an American connection here. James Sands moved to Rangers at the start of this year. He's been kind of a squad player for them, but he does get on the field fairly often, so it wouldn't surprise me if he plays in this final. For Frankfurt, is Timmy Chandler even somebody that we care about still, or
no? Where's this final happening?
This is in Seville. You thinking of going to this one?
No chance. But okay, so I'll pick. Who should we pick? Frankfurt or Rangers? I pick Rangers to be the NIT champions. Okay.
It's funny on Timmy Chandler. Do you remember there was a stretch in January/February of 2020? Mind you, this is like 30-year-old Timmy Chandler who had a 10-year career, plenty of empirical evidence that he's just an okay player, and yet he had this complete fluke, out of context, little scoring run in the Bundesliga, 3 or 4 weeks in a row he scored. And U.S. soccer Twitter, that became the thing there, that everybody flipped out over the fact that Timmy Chandler has to be on the national team. You even did a State of the Union about it. I remember Ian Joy and Derek Ray were coming after you on Twitter.
I didn't say that Timmy Chandler needed to be on the national team.
No, you were arguing against it, and then Ian Joy and Derek Ray came after you. And the whole argument does, the U.S. needs this scoring punch that he provides.
Right.
I checked. Over the last 2 seasons, he has 1 goal in 40 appearances in all competitions.
It was a brief shining moment.
I can't remember the last time I heard the name Timmy Chandler in a U.S. national team discussion.
Anybody with an American passport that scores goals is going to get attention. I get it. I understand it. But come on, Timmy Chandler. Playoffs.
And then everybody's favorite competition, the Conference League. The final is set there. It will be Roma against Feyenoord. Roma beat Leicester.
Does this count as a win for Mourinho if this happens? Like, does he?
It was 1-0 second leg, 2-1 on aggregate, right? Not 3-2 as Luis Aguilar put it here. I will double check that.
Well, I think you've established that any numbers that appear on a rundown are wrong. So don't even. Why are you even going by these?
Yeah, and then the other semifinal, this might have been where Luis got confused. Feyenoord, they were able to grind out a 0-0 draw in France, which gave them a 3-2 aggregate triumph over Marseille. So it'll be Roma against Feyenoord in the final. And, let me say something about Jose Mourinho. 5 years ago, in his first season with Manchester United, they won the Community Shield, they beat Leicester, they won the League Cup, and then they won the Europa League. Mind you, they had the easiest path to a European final you'll ever, like Keith Costigan still talks about that to this day, Liverpool super fan. He's still bitter about how easy of a path United had to that Europa League final.
Right.
But nevertheless, they won it, they beat Ajax, and Mourinho was stomping around the field after that final with this big scowl on his face and holding up 3 fingers to indicate a treble. And mind you, this was the Community Shield, League Cup, and Europa League. And it just felt so pathetic, him still trying to put forth this image as this top manager. And you fast forward 5 years later, he gets to a Conference League final and he's crying on the sidelines. And you can be cynical about it, but this hit me completely differently. And I found it incredibly endearing that at this point in his career, he kind of recognizes where he's at and the fact that this is a big deal to him. It is meaningful to get himself to a European final, even if it is to the quote unquote NIT of the NIT and whatever we want to say about this final.
Yeah, but it's all relative to the amount of money that you spent and who you are as a team. And so if the pride that a coach can feel, again, is relative to whatever the competition that they're facing. And so he's not with a team that is playing in the upper echelon of teams out there. And so, yeah, I also, while it hit you differently before than it does now,
You didn't have an issue with that.
I didn't have an issue before. I mean, it's different if it's an equal playing field, but it's not. And so everybody is, when a manager cries because they have avoided relegation, why? That's a moment of pride for
no. But the point is, his whole demeanor after that Europa League final with United, it wasn't one of crying, of happiness. It was this like cocky, like walking around the field like he was still like,
Yeah, but I think part of that, I think part of it is he's trying to, to mold the perception and the public perception of him as a winner and continue with that. But I don't have any problem with that type of celebration and the recognition that you play with what is in front of you.
So he's the first manager. He's obviously won the UEFA Champions League twice, the Europa League twice. The first time around it was still the UEFA Cup, and now he goes to a conference final. So he'll the first manager to get to the finals of those three competitions. Feyenoord can actually become the first club to win those three competitions. They won the European Cup back in 1970. They won the UEFA Cup twice, 74 and 2002. In 2002 with a young Robin van Persie, and now they can win this competition. So, the Cup Winners' Cup seems to have gone the way of the Confederations Cup, which is a competition that doesn't exist anymore. So it's been sort of airbrushed from history. It never gets brought up anymore. But nevertheless, the three competitions now are Champions League, Europa League, and Conference League. So you're going to start to see a lot of stats geared towards that, what people have done in those three competitions. As far as Americans here, nothing with Roma and not much of anything with Feyenoord. I know Cole Bassett went there at the start of this year. He's barely played. I'm not even sure he's in their Conference League squad. So, what do you do?
I got nothing.
All right. So we wondered, to circle back to the UCL semis, it was joy for Liverpool, heartbreak for City. We wondered how that was going to impact the Premier League title race as we segue to England here, a little weekend review. And it's actually Liverpool that blink. They're held to a 1-1 draw at home by Tottenham. City capitalized. They hammer Newcastle 5-0. So now City have a 3-point advantage with 3 games to go. And now they have the goal difference advantage. After the Liverpool game, Klopp, he did that whole passive-aggressive thing where he's like, I don't have an issue with the way Tottenham played. I could never play that way.
I hate that.
Well, he's seen a lot of that lately with Everton and Villarreal in that first leg. So you can tell he's tired of facing these.
But again, it's relative. Like no.
Yeah, it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
You're the coach of Liverpool.
And then Pep, after the City game, was fired up, and he went on a whole thing about how I know everybody wants Liverpool to win this. I know we're the bad guys here, and kind of thing. I don't sense that. Do you think most neutrals are rooting for Liverpool to win the Premier League title? I think
I think they're all bad guys. I think if the neutrals had their way, if they could both lose, that would be great.
Well, and Pep's carrying on about like, I don't know why people hate us so much. And then right on cue, the news comes out today that City are in fact going to sign Erling Haaland.
Right.
Pep, that's why. Another mega star going there for a massive fee, and the rich get richer.
Well, we're going to talk about what is and what isn't a super club later on in the show, but there's a reason why people hate you. It's because, like in all things in life, if you got more than somebody else, there is going to be a jealousy that oftentimes can manifest in the form of hatred.
City in the driver's seat. I don't think it's over, particularly since the injuries are piling up for City at the back. Pep confirmed after this game, Stones, Walker, and Ruben Dias all out for the season, so it's going to be a patchwork back line the rest of the way, and they still have games away to Wolves and away to West Ham, so they're in good shape, but I don't think it's completely over.
It's over.
In terms of top 4, I'm debating whether Chelsea need to be included in this conversation.
Ooh.
Looking at their fixture list, they're probably going to be okay, but man, the way they're playing this past weekend, Pulisic got the start. I thought played very well, assisted Lukaku for the second goal. So Chelsea are 2-0 up on Wolves at home. You figured, okay, this is 3 points in the bag, and Wolves come back. They equalize deep in stoppage time, so it ends 2-2. So right now it's Chelsea 67, Arsenal 66, and Tottenham 62. Arsenal beat Leeds at home. So they've opened up a 4-point gap on Tottenham for fourth. Those two teams play now on Thursday. Tottenham host Arsenal. If Arsenal win that, they clinch a Champions League spot, and even a draw.
And Chelsea plays Leeds.
And Chelsea plays Leeds. Right. Even a draw for Arsenal in that derby would be a good result. Tottenham really need a win there. But let's go back to Chelsea for a second. So Pulisic's father with a tweet that got a lot of attention. Tuchel was asked about it, and then he starts this game and plays well. Do you think on any level Tuchel was influenced by that? No,
I don't think on any. Either way, by the way. I mean, I think Tuchel has decided what Christian Pulisic is and isn't for him. As I said time and time again, it's not his cup of tea. But I don't think in the least that the tweet from Mark Pulisic, which was weird and then ultimately was deleted, and as I said last week, was a father just supporting and defending his son. I don't think that was that strategically that was placed and then had the reaction for Christian Pulisic playing. And Tuchel said as much. He came out after the game and said, "I got no problem," or even before the game, said, "I have no problem with Christian Pulisic. There's no problem here." Doesn't mean that he necessarily. Well, I don't think he has changed his assessment of what Christian Pulisic is at all. But that wasn't a great result for Chelsea, and that's the problem when you're on the field and there's not a good result.
Yeah. Manchester United were officially eliminated from top 4 contention by virtue of a 4-0 defeat to Brighton.
Wow.
The only thing I'll say about this game is the first Brighton goal came courtesy of Moise Caicedo, a kid who I absolutely love. He's this young Ecuadorian midfielder who's one of the best things that come out of South America in recent years. The only reason he ended up at Brighton, with all due respect to that club, is he had like this weird agent situation. Rory Smith wrote a whole piece about this, and it scared off the bigger clubs, including Manchester United. It became very shady there trying to negotiate.
A weird agent?
Yeah,
it's redundant.
And so he ends up at Brighton. It took a minute to adapt to European football to send him out on loan, but he's back now and bossing games in the Premier League against top clubs. He is going to be...
So he'll move.
And he's a key player for Ecuador who... I hope we get to see him at the World Cup. I don't know if you're following this story, but
it's crazy.
Ecuador might have used an ineligible player in some of their qualifiers, so Chile have filed a protest to FIFA, and if they were to get docked those points, Chile would go to the World Cup instead, so keep an eye on that story.
Oof.
And then very quickly, we're taking way too long here. At the bottom of the table, I mentioned Arsenal beat Leeds. It was another disastrous weekend for Leeds and Jesse Marsch because Everton beat Leicester. So Leeds are now in the bottom 3, 18th place with 3 rounds to go and trending in the wrong direction. We thought they were out of the woods, but they could be in some trouble.
Yeah, and like we said, they play Chelsea this week. It's going to be... Yeah, it's going to be difficult, and it's going to come down to the wire. They're going to need another type of magical result here in the next couple of weeks for Leeds. But yeah, I mean, Jesse Marsch, we know that he was handed a difficult situation, and off the bat, he did some really, really good things. And I don't think that where he is now necessarily negates all that he did. My worry is that if they go down, which wouldn't be necessarily a surprise given where they were, my worry is that it's not automatic that they come back up. I know you're given money, and you could bet, given the talent that they have, that they would come back up. But if it doesn't happen, I feel like Jesse, I want him to be in the EPL. I want him to be at the highest level in England, and I don't want him to be kind of out of sight, out of mind. I know there's a lot of people that follow the championship and a lot of people that follow Leeds, but I worry that this wonderful story will not get its due in the championship as opposed to week in and week out. And I just want to see him, start from scratch for a full year in the EPL with a summer and do what I think he wants to do as opposed to just fill in holes and working game to game and just doing anything in his power to keep them up in this moment.
In Spain, Real Madrid have already clinched the title, so they put out a heavily rotated side away to Atletico Madrid. Atletico took it 1-0 on a first-half penalty, which I didn't have an issue with. Some in the Madrid media thought it was very controversial, but yeah, Vallejo for a push on Mateus Cunha. What was crazy about it is that it was initially waved off. They kept playing. Real Madrid went down to the other end. Rodrigo took a shot that Oblak saved, but And then they buzzed the referee. He checked it and gave the penalty. Imagine if Real Madrid had scored in that sequence. That would have been very controversial. But nevertheless, it was called a penalty. Carrasco converted 1-0 Atletico. And then Barcelona beat Betis 2-1 away. Jordi Alba with a late winner, assisted by Dani Alves' 100th career La Liga assist. The combination of those two results, I think top four in Spain is set. It's going to be Barcelona, Sevilla, and Atletico. Betis will have to console themselves with having won the Copa del Rey. Speaking of Americans involved in relegation battles, though, our
had to mention it, right?
Stu Holden had a tough weekend.
Rough
Mallorca,
weekend.
they lose 6-2 to Granada.
At home.
And then Cadiz won as well. So Mallorca are now in the bottom three. We talked to Stu about it. He was very despondent. Huh?
Yes, he was not happy with this result. I mean, this was the result that they needed. You're playing at home. You're playing against Granada. And not only did they lose, but they lost. Well, I mean, losing is losing at this point. They just need the 3 points. So that could be the nail in the coffin for Mallorca. And so they'll go down, and all that entails from a business perspective. And, you know, they knew it was going to be difficult, but he's not happy.
Serie A title race rolls on. Inter came from 2-0 down to beat Empoli 4-2, which put the pressure on AC Milan, who trailed Verona 1-0, but then they scored 3 unanswered. Sandro Tonali with 2 goals there. So they both win. It means Milan stays 2 points ahead with 2 rounds to go, and they have the head-to-head tiebreaker. So AC Milan in pretty good shape there. Their next game, though, is a tough one away to Atalanta. Inter, in the midst of this title race, also have the Coppa Italia final against Juventus. So interesting end to the season in Italy. Bundesliga, Bayern have already clinched. The only point of interest there this weekend is Freiburg got thumped at home by Union Berlin, and Leipzig hammered Augsburg 4-0. Both Tyler Adams and Ricardo Pepe came on in the second half of this game. So those results mean Leipzig leapfrogged Freiburg into 4th place. They're 2 points ahead going into the last weekend here. And Freiburg have to go to Leverkusen. So I think Leipzig are in good shape. They're going to finish in the top 4, so they can at least console themselves with getting a Champions League berth. By the way, their sporting director there had some interesting comments about Jesse Marsch this past week.
What did he say? I didn't hear.
He said Jesse Marsch, it was a mistake. He tried to change everything, and it wasn't all too kind to
Wasn't
Jesse.
glowing. Wasn't glowing.
And there's some relegation stuff going on with the Bundesliga involving Augsburg are safe, by the way.
But
So that's good
Pepe
news.
looks like, well, I mean, his team will be playing in the Bundesliga next year. So
it's Hertha Berlin, Stuttgart, Arminia Bielefeld. Those are the 3 teams involved still. And next week, after it's all done, I'll let you know how everything shook out. And then the only thing I want to say, Liga, PSG have obviously already clinched. Another embarrassing result to add to their collection. They had a 2-0 lead at home against relegation-threatened Troyes. And if I didn't sound pretentious enough, I'm going to pronounce that team again. It's Troyes. And that
how do you spell that?
Troyes.
Tro. It's not Troyes?
No.
Troyes or
and their opponents came back and equalized, so it ended 2-2. And the reason I bring this up is American Eric Palmer Brown started in the center of defense for Troyes. And with this result, it looks like they're going to stay up. And he held up pretty well against that attack, Neymar, Mbappe, Messi. Although I did see U.S. fans on Twitter say he went up against the greatest attack in history. That's very August 2021.
Right.
You know, when we were still looking at this PSG team on paper, there's 9 months of empirical evidence that this was not the greatest attack in history. But nevertheless, it's pretty good players he went up against. He held up pretty well. So given the Miles Robinson news this weekend, everybody's kind of looking at these other center backs that are in the mix. So, good performance for Eric Palmer Brown there. So that's it for the weekend in Europe. We can move on.
Oh, well, that was a good roundup, my friend. We did it pretty quickly. That was pretty good. I think we hit everything. All right, should we take another break?
Yeah.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, it's time for Ask Alexi. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, and it's time for Ask Alexi. You send us in questions and comments on the old social media platforms out there, and use that hashtag Ask Alexi, and we pick a few. Or you can call in at 657-549-2297, 657-549-2297. That's the State of the Union podcast hotline. But I think we got Twitter questions this week, right?
Correct.
Okay, what do we got?
First up, at Old Man Marks asks, Lexi, what are your thoughts on the new Chelsea ownership and what it means for Chelsea's future?
So who are we talking about here? I know that we were talking off air about how to pronounce and who these people are.
It is Todd Bowley. You and I looked up a couple of clips from English pundits saying it, and they completely butchered it. And we listened to that. We said, this can't be right. And then we listened to Americans saying it, and we got the correct pronunciation. So it is Todd Bowley.
I mean, they can't pronounce Martinez. It's got an accent over the syllable. I mean, What were they doing this weekend? Jimenez? No, they can't do it. The accent is right there for you, all right? They make it easy for you. How can we screw this up? All right, anyway.
So American businessman, he's actually part owner of the Dodgers and the Lakers, and now he's going to buy Chelsea for, it sounds like, around $5 billion. Obviously, Abramovich has been sanctioned by the British government and forced to sell Chelsea, so Bowley steps in. He was at the game this past weekend.
And evidently, this money is going to be put and frozen into a UK bank account, and then, according to what Abramovich had promised publicly, is going to 100% go to charity. So not only is it being sold, but Abramovich is going to take, well, it's not really a $5.25 billion loss, because I suppose he can write it off. I mean, with this donation, it's got to be one of the greatest donations in history, and who it goes to and how it gets dispersed I'm sure there will be books written about it later on, given how we know when billions and billions of dollars are put out for what on the surface is good intentions oftentimes get pushed in different directions. So, I mean, look, this is a very different type of ownership group than Roman Abramovich, to say the least. I think everybody understands that for Roman Abramovich, it was much less a business and much more a labor of love and a toy that he put a tremendous amount of resources into, but the balance sheet, if you will, was secondary. This will be people who understand, and not that Roman Abramovich doesn't understand business, but are approaching this not, again, as just something, a toy, but as much more of a business. And it will be interesting when they get a look under the hood as to how this has been run, what they want to change, and then how does that affect the way that we look at Chelsea, which right now we still look at them as a super club, and therefore the expectations of what they do, the players that they sign, what they win, and how they, the perception in our collective consciousness, does that change? And I think that's the big question. I think that Mr. Bowley, is that what we're calling him?
Yep.
When he does get that peek under the hood and some of the realities are made very, very clear to him and his leadership group, that there will be decisions that are made from a business standpoint that are very, very different than what would have been made under a Roman Abramovich reign. And it might not, on the surface, be what fans want. I mean, what's the first question anybody answers? Are you going to spend money? Are you going to spend more money? And they may look and say, why are we spending more money? What's our return? And that's, I guess, the reality, but also to many in the way they would look at the danger of, looking at these businesses as businesses. So I don't know. What do you think it's going to fundamentally change things?
A couple things I would say here. You would think replacing a disgraced Russian oligarch who has ties to Vladimir Putin would be small shoes to fill. But as we know, football fans don't think like that. They could care less about Abramovich's activities around the world. They care about what he's meant for Chelsea. And it's why the majority of Chelsea fans worship the man. Sure. And think he's the best thing that ever happened to them. And they just look at all the money he spent, as you mentioned, and the success they've had under him. He's turned Chelsea into a much bigger club than they ever were before. And they've won 5 Premier League titles, 2 Champions League titles, 2 Europa League crowns, a boatload of FA Cup crowns. So actually, it's incredibly big shoes to fill from a sporting perspective for Todd Bowley. And number 2...
And he's American, right?
Yes, which that was going to be my next point. We know the way English fans feel about these American owners. We've seen the antipathy towards the Glazers at Manchester United, Kroenke at Arsenal. Even Liverpool, who are held up as like a success story as far as American ownership, it got to that point after they hired Jurgen Klopp and started winning. But in the beginning, Liverpool fans weren't all that predisposed to like that ownership group either. So he's got to fight that obstacle as well. So I hope Todd Bowley knows the waters that he's venturing into. This is going to
I think he does. I mean, he was in the stands the other day.
A bit baffled by the offside rule. And
it's all right. It's a work in progress. So, oh my God. But I will follow the money, man. over $5 billion evidently is going to be donated. All right, where is it being donated and how is it being spent?
Next question. At Here or AWOL asks, Mosse said on today's pod that Liverpool isn't a super club. I disagree. Brand expectations and the money to back the first two up are all there. What's the definitive State of the Union pod worldwide super club list? So first off, I replied to this gentleman on Twitter. I walked back my comments a little bit, and we came to an amicable understanding.
On Twitter?
Yeah, Luis Aguilar trying to stir up trouble here, but this issue has been settled. So the context was, on last week's pod, we were discussing Jurgen Klopp's standing in the game, and I was trying to make the point that although his trophy haul isn't that impressive, when you analyze what he inherited at each of the clubs he's worked at and the work he's done there, I think he does go down in my book as an all-time great manager. And in Liverpool's case, I think after exchanging tweets with this guy, where we've settled on is, as we sit here today, yes, they clearly are a super club. They did try to join something called the Super League fairly recently. But he agreed with me that when Klopp walked in the door in October of 2015, Liverpool was nowhere near the upper echelons of European football. And the way they got there is worthy of admiration. It was not super clubby. It was not throwing crazy money at established stars. It was smart signings. It was developing players. It was turning non-superstars into superstars like Mohamed Salah. So that's all I was saying.
So wait,
and I think
crazy
most people,
money is throwing money at players that don't work out, right?
Well, at established stars. Like, I don't think it takes much smarts for Manchester City to buy Erling Haaland while, buying somebody like Mo Salah and Sadio Mane and Roberto Firmino and what those guys were when they walked in the door.
Salah was not just playing on the side of the road somewhere, Mosse. I mean, come on.
So you disagree with the premise that Liverpool's rise under Klopp hasn't been that super clubby? You think the way they operate is
Well, then take away the money. Let's see the rise. Let's see him do without the money.
There you go.
No, I mean, look, we talked earlier in the pod about people. If neutrals actually had their way, they would want neither of these teams to win when it comes to Manchester City and Liverpool. And so my definition all along of a super club has been the club that as many people love as hate. All right, and there will be people that will hate watch you, but they will watch, because they care and because you are relevant, and you are relevant for the success that you have, but you're also relevant in whatever failures that they have. And yes, you have hedged your bets and you will limit those failures, but if and when they come, as many people will rejoice and dance on your grave as will lament the fact that you didn't win. And so, without a doubt, Liverpool is a super club.
I agree.
We have
given
established
the brilliant work of Klopp and reinvigorating that brand and taking all different factors into account as we sit here in 2022, they are 100% a super club. So I'd like to clarify that if I gave anybody the wrong idea in last week's pod.
Let's do this then for Here or AWOL, whatever. Because there's only a handful of super clubs in the world, right? So in England, who you got? Liverpool, Man City. I'm still going to say Chelsea, Manchester United. I'm still going to say Manchester United. And I'm going to give Spurs the benefit of the doubt, and Arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, the question would be Arsenal and Tottenham.
Right.
They're kind of...
They're on the
depends on your
periphery.
definition.
Yes,
but yeah, the other
super
four.
secret probation.
Would you say that the fact that you tried to join the Super League or you were included in that doesn't automatically make you a super club? Because Atletico Madrid were in that mix.
No, I don't consider Atletico Madrid a super club. And there's only two in Spain.
I agree.
I would consider Dortmund and Bayern Munich in Germany.
Dortmund a super club.
Yeah, I know. I mean, but it's yes. Well, who else? You just go with Bayern.
I would
Munich.
just go with Bayern. Yeah. Dortmund are borderline.
It is borderline. It's borderline. I feel like I have to. I don't want to just do one, right? Well, although when I get to France, there's only one.
France is only one.
That's PSG, right?
Anybody in Italy right now? Would Juventus?
Yes.
They've been the ringleaders of the Super League, so they clearly think they are.
I'd still say Juventus, Inter, and AC Milan, and they're grandfathered in AC Milan, and obviously it's what they have done in the past. And I know they're not spending the type of money that they have in the past, but I'd still look at them. I mean, I still think that there's a cachet to signing with AC Milan. Not the way it was in the past, but still.
So somewhere between 10 to 15,
Yes.
depending on how you feel about Arsenal, Tottenham, Dortmund, some of these borderline ones we mentioned.
And even within those 10, there is an upper echelon. So, when Erling Haaland, there's only 2 or 3 clubs that he's really going to, let's be honest.
Yeah, he was not signing with Tottenham.
No,
Yeah.
that's not happening. All right, good question, though.
All right. We'll end on this. This is, well, let me read the question first, then I'll
Why do you
riff
preface
on,
it all with
then
such
I'll-
a negative type of attitude? You do this all the time, all right?
I like this guy at Wolves Boy Wonder.
I feel a
He
butt
asks,
coming.
Mosse, what are your thoughts on a Cubano as a man of culture? I don't mind this question on Twitter, but then for Luis Aguilar to pull this and put it in the pod is such a lame attempt to create another Wings moment with you.
Oh.
And you already replied to this guy and made clear you have no strong feelings one way or the other about the Cubano, and neither do I. So I don't know what...
Well, I have no strong feelings because I don't know what the hell it is. What is it?
Let's go to Wikipedia for this one.
We're gonna. Okay, this is good. This is great radio.
I feel like Mike Francesa here.
It's called the Cubano or a Cubano. I mean, I know it's a sandwich, evidently.
Yeah,
Couldn't tell you
a
what's in it.
Cuban sandwich is a variation of a ham and cheese sandwich that likely originated in cafes catering to Cuban workers in Tampa or Key West. 2 early Cuban immigrant communities in Florida centered on the cigar industry. Later on, Cuban exiles and expatriates brought it to Miami, where it is also very popular. Main ingredients: Cuban bread, ham, Swiss cheese, pickled cucumber, and mustard.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good at all. I'm sure it's good. Wait, it's called a Cubano, but it doesn't even come from Cuba? It said it came from Tampa?
Well, Cuban immigrants in Florida.
Well, right, but that's coming from Florida, which is in America last time I checked, right?
Yep.
Okay, so it's not actually a Cuban sandwich. It's an American sandwich that Cuban immigrants put together, right?
That's what it sounds like.
Okay. Well, listen, have you had one before?
I have. I probably oversold it. I replied to this guy on Twitter and said, "Oh yeah, I love it. I've had it in my life and enjoyed it, but it's not like one of my favorite sandwiches."
I would never think if I saw it on the menu. Well, first off, I wouldn't know what it was, and I would not order it. It sounds interesting. Is there meat in it? Did you say there's meat in it, or what? Oh, ham? Like a ham sandwich? I like a ham sandwich, not with pickles and other sorts of crap.
I know Luis is jonesing to do this. Do you want to bring one in for next week's podcast?
We should definitely
which
do
will
this.
be in the afternoon, so it wouldn't be that gross to eat.
All right, we'll do that. We'll bring it in, and I will be exposed, and I will know what a Cuba. But as is often the case, if there's anybody out there in the Los Angeles area that has the place to go to for a Cubano sandwich, please let us know, because if we're going to do this, let's do this right. All right. Anything else, Mosse?
That is it.
All right. Remember to send all your questions in there with the hashtag Ask Alexi, or if you want to call us about a Cubano sandwich or anything else out there, use our hotline, 657-549-2297. That's 657-549-2297. All right. We're coming to the end of our show, and we'll take a quick break. When we come back, I'll give you my one for the road. Don't go anywhere. All right. Welcome back. It's the end of our show, and, we've gone kind of long today, but... sue us. So at the end of each and every show, as you know, I give you my one for the road, and this will be the epilogue, the coda, whatever you want to call it, the last that I shall speak about the Insufferables, and that would be the Seattle Sounders. Again, congratulations for winning CONCACAF Champions League, and in doing so, providing not just a moment of joy, but also a level of competition and a lighting, as I said, of a fire. And not just for Liga MX, which we know is coming, but also internally for others. We were talking last segment about hate watching. And I guarantee you that there were plenty of teams out there and players and coaches who were watching, and while they recognized the benefit and the positive of Seattle winning CONCACAF Champions League, they wanted to be the first. And, Stephen Fry, after Seattle won, was very clear and concise in the pride that he took of being the first to do something that hopefully is going to become commonplace going forward. It is that box that is checked. It is not a silver bullet. It is not a panacea, as we have said time and time again, but it is an important moment. And I do hope that it is the start of something big. I do hope that it is the start of Major League Soccer. And listen, I know we love to tell other people how to spend their money, but it's what we do. And sometimes we get very simplistic about it, and we don't know all of the information and the challenges that are happening behind the scenes. But I do hope that this is a moment where some of the voices and some of the personalities and some of the leadership of Major League Soccer recognizes that if they want to grow and have another 30 years with even more robust type of growth, there have to be things that are done that are big and bold. And again, not taking anything away from the progress that MLS has made off of incremental growth and small steps and small victories along the way, which has enabled the league to survive and thrive. You know, we're coming to, let's say, the next decade that is going to be crucial. That is going to be crucial in terms of the development, not just of Major League Soccer, but the development of soccer in the United States, in Canada, and to a certain extent in Mexico. And big, bold things have to be done. But they can't just be done in the moment. They have to be planned for, they have to be seen, and they have to be executed. And there is opportunity out there for Major League Soccer. There's opportunity out there for Major League Soccer to become something more than it has been. As wonderful as it has been, maybe I'm greedy, but I want more. And in order to get there, you have to do big, bold things. And MLS is coming to the end of their broadcast rights deal. And we know how important broadcast rights are in sports. And so if this moment of celebration and joy lights that fire that enables MLS teams and MLS as a whole to do something big and different and bold here in the coming years, especially leading up to 2026, then that in and of itself may be the greatest thing to come from this moment. But if it doesn't, and it doesn't trigger those types of things, then while MLS will continue to progress, I'm not sure that it can progress at the rate that it needs to. And I'm not sure it can make the impact and therefore have the relevance that it needs to have going forward and live up to the stated goals of being a league of choice, of competing with the world and the unique challenges that come with a league like MLS being constantly compared and contrasted with the rest of the world. And at times, showing well in that compare and contrast, and at times, let's be honest, not showing well. So how do you show well? How do you become something bigger and something better than what you are? And again, it's not just about spending money. It's also about thinking and dreaming and having vision to do bigger and better things. And not waiting around. And they're not all going to go perfectly. They're not all going to go smoothly. But I've seen what this league has become over the last almost 30 years. And as proud as I am of it, I want more. And I don't know what that moment is going to be that changes it and injects it with that energy and that adrenaline and that steroid, if you will, that makes it a league unlike anything that we have known in the past. But if this league is to be global and to be perceived as something more than it has been, that's gotta happen. And again, I'm spending other people's money and telling them how to spend their money at times. And I know that that's certainly easy. And if it was my money, maybe I would look at it in different ways. But it's not. And who knows if they'll listen or even if they should listen. You know, they've constructed and created the most successful professional soccer league in American and Canadian history. And hats off to all of them that have gone through all the difficult times to get us here. But where are we in the next 10 years? And where are we in the next 30 years? And what needs to be done in order to make that time something different and something the likes of which we haven't seen here? Because if we're not aspiring to do that, then what the hell are we doing? Anyway. Anything, Mosse?
That's it.
Thank you so much for everybody for hanging with us. If you hung with us throughout these almost 2 hours here, it went a little bit long, but we like to think of it as giving you something a little bit extra. We thank you so much for listening and reviewing and subscribing and rating and doing all the different things that you do. Continue to do that. We'll be back here, same time, same place next week on the State of the Union, myself and my good friend David Mosse. And until then, and as always, remember, size the day. You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.